discussant to give a statement is Esiaba Irobi, and he said that he would prefer to stand up in order.
Yes, that's because I have a bad back, and if I sit down for too long, I won't be able to stand up at all. I'm so happy that Professor Baba spoke before me, because when I arrived in England to do my PhD, that was just when Nation and Narration had come out, and that broke the ground for us who were arriving in England to become scholars, and he opened the door for us. And I'm also happy that he's provided a lot of the theoretical infrastructure that is needed for what I'm going to talk about, which is what I want to give you is a domesticated and digested notion of the quest for identity. My quest for identity, my perpetual quest for identity, and how that informs both the creative work I do and my scholarship, and how, for some people, the question of citizenship is not possible. When you're exiled from your country by a military government on the pain of death, and they even send hired killers to kill you wherever you are, the question of participation, in the way that we think about it, is a luxury in Europe. So these are differences that we need to take into account. My quest for identity started when I was born. I was born on the 1st of October, 1960. That was the day Nigeria got its independence from Britain. So as the Union Jack was coming down, another flag was going up. And so while I was in my mother's womb, I was a British subject of a colony. I was protected by the Queen. And then as I came out, I was a citizen of a country called Nigeria, which is a country that I call made in England, made in Berlin. As you know how these countries came into being. The European countries came together in 1884 or 1885. It could be one of those years, we're not sure. And then they said, we're going to now divide Africa into pieces like a Kentucky Fried Chicken. And then, France took the wings, Germany took the rump, and England took the head. And then in Nigeria, what came to be Nigeria, they've put in kingdoms, nation states that were not defined, that you wouldn't define by the European terms. These were very powerful empires. For example, the Yorubas had an empire before the British. But when the British came, they simplified the Yorubas into a tribe. This was a very complex society, okay? But essentially what happened was we had Nigeria, which is a fiction. And then I come from a part of Nigeria called the Igbos. We are known for having, from history, been a democratic society. We don't have kings. We don't believe in the concept of kings. The Yorubas have a monarchy. The Hausas have a monarchy. So it was very easy when the British came to say to the emir, who are you? I'm the emir. What are these people? It's a feudal society. Oh, these are my people. They go to the Yorubas, the Oba. Oh, these are my people. Then they come to the Igbos and say, where is your king? The Igbos said, we don't have a king. Everybody's a king unto himself. And they said, okay, if you don't have a king, we'll make a king for you. And they said, well, maybe the white man wants somebody to eat. So they got the village clown, who was at his best an idiot, and as it was a nuisance, and gave to the British. And they went away, and the next day somebody came back with a cap and a warrant, and he judged cases for all the people, including marital cases, law cases, land cases, and everything. So essentially, the Igbos had always felt the British had to establish an indirect rule, a system where they had warrant chiefs doing their job for them because they couldn't understand the society. And then when they imposed taxes on people, the men paid the taxes. The women said, we're not going to pay this tax. And the British said, oh, no, you're going to pay the tax. And the women said, we're not going to pay it. So they thought it was a joke. Then the women galvanized themselves, stomped the British headquarters, burnt it down, broke down the women's prison, released all the women, cut the British colonial officer, stripped him naked, measured his equipment with a ruler, showed it around to the women, and burned down the place. And that was when the British sent women to come and study the Igbo political system to understand why the men could do why the women could do what the men could not do, and why the women, Igbo women, were different from women in England, and why women had more power politically in Igbo culture than in Britain, or even in the United States in 1929. So this is a question of identity. When I was in Nigeria, I thought I was Igbo. I was in Nigeria. I didn't believe in Nigeria. By 1967, we broke out, the Republic of Biafra. If you know the history, you know that we fought for 2.5 years to be a country. And we were a country, we had everything that could make a country. The British government, led by Harold Wilson, paid for every bullet that was fought, that was used in that war. And what were the British fighting for? The crude oil deposits. And so they brought the Igbos back, and it became Nigeria. Now the Igbos are second-class citizens. They don't have power in Nigeria. They don't have power anywhere. And the greatest number of scholars who are in exile are Igbos all over the world. So we are dispersed, we are lost, and we don't have an identity. For my own case, because I committed this crime of writing a play which criticized the military government, I can't even go back to Nigeria. And I could be killed, just like my friend was killed. So when I wrote that play, the British Council got me a fellowship, sent me to Britain. I went to Britain, and I said, now I have a different identity. I'm not Nigerian, I'm not Igbo. I'm going to be a British citizen, and I'm going to work out on my scholarship, and I'm going to become the next Homi Baba or Paul Gilroy and all that. And by the time I finished my PhD, Homi Baba had disappeared to the US. Paul Gilroy had disappeared to the US. I said, okay, I'll still stay on, I'll finish this thing. So I said, I'm going to stay on here. And then one day, I was coming back from my office at 12 midnight. There was a football match. Liverpool had lost. And I was walking past. This young man came out from the car and said to me, where's this hotel? I said, it's just around the corner. And then he walked past, and he said, what did you say? I said, and he said, fucking. He said it using expletives, nigga, da, da, da. And then I just kept walking. And then he went under the carpet of his car and pulled. I had never seen a knife that long. It was this long, and he pulled it out. And he came after me. And I started walking very fast, and he came on. And then I crossed a road, and there was a man coming from here, and the man stopped him and held him. I said, what's wrong and all that? And he said he was talking to that, and he da. And then I walked home, and I was so shocked. I said, so, with your PhD and everything, you're nothing. You could just be killed here. And I went the next day and told my supervisor, Martin Barnum, I said, I'm changing the topic of my PhD dissertation. It's no longer going to be a comparative study of African and British community theater. I want to change it to a theater for cannibals, images of Europe in African, pre-colonial, colonial, and post-colonial African theater. And what I did was to reverse, to look at how Europe, protective representation of Africans in European literature, in European performance, in Shakespeare and all that, and then I showed how the Africans were using the theater to also represent the British, and there's a trajectory there of the British were facing as curiosities, and then as they settled, they became malignant, and then suddenly the image turned to benign after independence. So that was my PhD dissertation. And so from the experience I had in my quest for identity in Britain to become a British citizen came this work, which is A Theater for Cannibals. Then once I finished my PhD, I fled. I came to the US. I was at New York, NYU for for 3 years, and then I got a job at Ohio. And then it was time for tenure. And then there were 10 people who were to vote for tenure. 9 of them were white, and by white I mean European Americans. 9 voted for me, and 1 person did not vote for me, and was the chairman of the P&T committee, and he was a black man. And that shocked me. And I said, what is this? And they said, well, it's a kind of discrimination. You are not African American, you are African. That was another crisis of an identity. I thought I could become an African American. And so at this point, I said, well, I've reached a point where I have to practice what I think is my identity now, which is how to become a scholar in a world that is conducive to scholarship. And I said, I think the best thing might be for me to move to France. I've given you this synopsis to show that there are people who, all their lives, perpetually, they're in exile, they're questioning for an identity, and identity could either be a fiction or a luxury for some people. Now, in the work that I'm doing right now, I said, how do I address this question of identitylessness? And I said, well, what I could do is to begin to bring together the thoughts and ideas and theories that translocated from Africa to the New World, to the Caribbean, South America, the North America, in terms of performance. And that's why I started, before they danced in chains, Performance Theories of Africa and the African Diaspora. So in a sense, my quest for identity keeps translating into a field which is the only field where I can work, which I can contest, which I can have citizenship, which is within the academy and within scholarship. So, and then after that, I started thinking of another work which could actually bring into discuss the whole question of what happens when you leave your country and you have to find yourself and a place for the thought, the ideas of your society elsewhere, within a world, an academy, whose language, whose mechanisms for judgment are not yours. So that's when I started thinking of there is a thief in all of us, the politics and aesthetics of international performance in the age of globalization. And I'm looking at the beleaguered nature of having to negotiate discourses about yourself, about what you think is your identity, about what you think is the intellectual history of your society in a milieu that is not yours. And the judgment is made by people who do not understand your language, who do not understand your meta-languages, who do not understand your history, and who finally give you a pass mark if somehow you do not infringe upon what they think is canonical to thought, to knowledge. So in a sense, when we talk of identity politics, it is a concept that, for me, is continuously contested. It is a context that, as Homi Baba mentioned, is an idea that identity, for me, is work in progress. It is how do you define what you've been through, where you're coming from and where you're going through what you're creating. As Derek Walcott put it, he said, "Where is my rest place, Jesus? Where is the pillow I will not have to pay for?" So while there are people who have the security of this is my nation, I'm German, I'm British, I'm Irish, there are some of us who cannot say I'm Nigerian. I'm not Nigerian. I don't like Nigeria. I cannot live in a country where 49 years after independence, you cannot provide water, you cannot provide health care, there are no roads, and you cannot work with a laptop because the lights will keep going off and on. Okay? And so with what Professor Baba said about authority, we're dealing here at all phases, at all, what you're doing or what I've been doing is climbing bridges, climbing hurdles. You climb the Nigerian hurdle, you climb the British hurdle, you climb the American hurdle, the next one is the French hurdle. And then you wait and hope that one day Nigeria will have light, water, and all that, and you can go back to your country, where you think is your country, and where you try to shape an identity for yourself, and all the while, it's all been a whole process of frustration. In conclusion, I just want to say that the notion of politics, as I understand it, is beyond participation in partisan politics. There is the politics of the sexual politics. There's the politics of love. There's the politics of exile, traveling, of becoming, and that you're not within your country trying to shape the evolution of that country politically does not mean that you may not be able to contribute to the image of that country. Ben Okri is a Nigerian. He left Nigeria, he came to Britain, he won the Booker Prize. That achievement gave prominence to Nigeria as a country that produces good literature. That is an identity that he's created for himself, which is a purely literary. It's an achievement, and it's a great mark of who he is, maybe not where he comes from, but what he's been able to achieve from the denial of where he comes from. And for me, what I'm waiting for is one day to win something like the Booker Prize or the Pulitzer Prize, and the first statement I'm going to make is, today, I want to tell the world that I'm not a citizen of Nigeria. I am now a citizen of literature. And that, I think, will be my biggest revenge, that I'm able to disown the country that at one time disowned me, disallowed me citizenship, and allowed me participation only in one field of performance, which is scholarship. And even within the Western Academy, my position is to fulfill what I think is my role, which is to work as a rebel, as an anti-establishment, as somebody who's questioning everything the West has said about Africa and the African diaspora. And the mountain is huge. It's a tome to deconstruct the notions, the writings about what we have produced, and that is what my presentation tomorrow will be about. It is titled, "What Did I Do to Be So Black and Blue? Race, Sex, Biraciality," and how the primal factors for the construction, and how these are the primal factors for the construction of political citizenship and participation in Europe and its diasporas, like the United States. So my battle is with Europe and the European diaspora. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Esiaba. And we are slightly behind schedule. What I gathered from this second round is that I see a certain tendency in all these four statements to move closer to the question of power and authority. Is that perhaps the crucial problem? Are our identities only fictions? As you said, Nigeria is a fiction when you started your statement, and the real problem that is at the basis of all our debates is the question: who is authorized to speak out in the public sphere within our states, but also in the international arena? That raises, of course, the important question, is there a society of people who would be equal in the most radical sense, where everyone would be